The Room Without Corners. Chapter 1. The House That Listened. By the time the dirt struck the lid of my mother's coffin, the sky had already decided to be quiet. The mourners had dwindled into their cars. A man in a red tie who had introduced himself as a cousin I'd never met folded his sympathy into my hand like a receipt. I stood there, counting. 21 clods of earth. 21 small thuds, as if the ground were learning to speak. "Miss Lay," the funeral director said, a gentle break to my counting. "Do you need a ride back?" "I drove," I said, though I hadn't. The habit of saying the thing that would end the conversation had clung to me since childhood, like the smell of mothballs on a coat. He nodded anyway, grateful, and vanished into the hush of the cemetery office. I waited until his silhouette slipped out of the window frame and then walked to the only place I had left to go, the house on Quiet Street. The house was best understood as a listener. It had never been just a structure, never only the place where the kettle sang and the neighbor's cat yowled at dawn. It had ears. I used to imagine them embedded in the plaster, cupped under paint, listening to us with patient, damp attention. My mother used to whisper to the corners, and when I was very small, I whispered back. I parked beneath the jacaranda, its papery blooms littering the driveway in purple tears. The front door stuck in the same way it always had, a brief resistance at the lock, and then the sigh of wood that recognized you. On the hall table, under the cobalt bowl, the key waited exactly where the realtor had said it would be. Attached to the key, a tag in my mother's precise, feverish handwriting, "Room." I didn't need the rest of the sentence to know which room she meant. The basement. The room without corners. The one with the mirror that was not a mirror. But first I went to the kitchen. The house smelled like old lemon oil and the sweetness of stale bread. On the refrigerator, a magnet pinned a list in my mother's hand: milk, lavender soap, mothballs, lottery tickets. A grocery list for someone who planned small futures. When I opened the cupboard, a roach crab walked into a crack, and the silence it left behind was embarrassed. Above the sink, my reflection hovered in the evening window, pale, hair pulled back in an elastic band that had given up hours ago. A black dress with pockets, because grief needs somewhere to put its hands. 32 and shaped like a person you could forget you'd met. In my palm the key warmed until it felt like a pulse. The light switch for the basement was still a string, frayed at the knot like a ragged wish. I pulled it, and the bulb woke with the old complaint of tungsten. The stairs complained too. I counted them 21 again, though I knew there were only 19. 2 phantom steps. Memory's private arithmetic. At the bottom of the stairs, my childhood peeled back, and the basement came forward like a face under water. The door was heavier than I remembered. The key turned with a tactile memory, the scrape and notch familiar to my hand before it was familiar to my mind. The door opened onto a curved white space, an egg someone had sliced open, a room designed by a person who believed in removing angles the way some people believe in removing sugar. No corners. The walls bent into one another so gently that there was no place for shadows to sharpen into points. And along one wall, the mirror. "Hello," I said, or meant to say. It came out as a breath. I faced myself, facing myself. If you have never stood before a one-way mirror as a child, you might not know how quickly you learn to doubt glass. They call it observation glass. A true one-way mirror is a compromise between light and looking, a trick you agree to participate in by virtue of standing there. If the room behind it is dark and yours is lit, all you will see is yourself. If the rooms reverse, the world reverses with them. As a child, I had been told it was simply a mirror, but I had known about the dark. I had felt it watching me. There was a thinness at the edge of the glass that my fingernail found when my mother's back was turned. There was the tremble of air, the way rooms breathe even when closed. Now, in the house's first night without my mother, I set the key on the small metal table beside the couch. The couch had been purchased in 1998 from a clinic supply catalog. My mother had told me this once with pride, as if the imprimatur of medicine sanctified the whole arrangement. She'd been a believer in rituals that borrow the costume of science. The couch had never been comfortable. Whoever designed it imagined patients should never mistake therapy for a nap. On the table, a small metronome off. A stack of spiral notebooks with coffee stains lacquering their corners. A ceramic bowl containing a handful of small, smooth stones like hard candy you weren't allowed to eat. The room unfolded in its old pose, the workspace of a person I had been told I used to be. The child version of me had sat on the couch with her hands around the stones while the metronome ticked, while the mirror listened. There is a word for remembering something you're not entirely sure is yours. I can't remember the word. That felt appropriate. My mind offered me the crisp outlines of the room and the smudged edges of me within it. One memory came in time with the metronome that still wasn't ticking. My mother's left hand on my knee, her right hand turning the dial. Tick, tell the truth, Mara. Tock, tell it the way we practiced. My name is Mara now. It was also Mara then. The continuity of that fact sometimes felt like an accusation. In the mirror, my face lifted slowly, as if it were receiving instructions from behind the glass. I didn't turn on the metronome. I don't trust machines that keep time. They are too certain. Certainty is often a kind of rudeness. The notebooks were labeled with dates in my mother's hand. The first one began when I was 7, April 9. Under the date, her printing was childlike. The school teacher neatness she later lost and then found again when she wanted to seem harmless. Session 1. Dr. Vale present behind glass. M. Cooperative. Object present. Strawberry. The air in the room made a small change. It shifted the same way air shifts when you realize that the word you're reading on a page is your own name. I read the line again. Object present. Strawberry. I remembered the strawberry, the way you remember the shape of a swimming pool from another summer. It had been plastic and had smelled like factory. There had been a game, a sort of ritual with the strawberry that made no sense when I tried to explain it later to anyone in college, and so I had stopped trying. Only my mother and I had known the rules. And Dr. Vale, who had watched from the other side of the glass, in college, when I needed to place the story somewhere that would keep it from spilling, I wrote it in a freshman psych essay about suggestibility. The professor had returned the paper with a line under a paragraph. Fascinating speculative case. Please keep personal anecdotes out of formal assignments. I had not been brave enough then to write the truth. If you write the truth and someone calls it speculative, the lie is not in your writing. I turned a page. Session 2. M. Reluctant requests mother's lap. Object present. Hairbrush. Session 3. M. Avoids eye contact. Object present. Strawberry. The strawberry again and again. Years of practice. A fruit that never bruised. The pages had a cadence that my pulse began to mirror. My mother had rated my compliance in tidy numbers. 7/10, 4/10, 10/10 with a circle and a smiley face. There were remarks in the margins about which words I had avoided and which I had supplied. And then, in a looping hand that was not my mother's, a note. You are making a scientist of the child. Remember, you are also making a witness. It was signed with a sharp V. Veil. I tried to summon his face and found instead the outline of a man who wore his intellect like a hat. When you looked at him, you noticed the hat before you noticed him. He had known when silence would make you speak. The opposite of leading questions isn't neutrality. It's patience used as a tool. He had been so good at that. We had not spoken in 15 years. On the far side of the room, the mirror softened into a shadow, and in that shadow I felt the old arrangement. Behind the glass there was a narrow corridor, a red light, a table with a tape recorder. When the house was still unsold and the realtor had first let me in to take measurements for grief, the breaker in that corridor had been off. I had flicked it on. There had been a sound then, when the power returned. Not the clack of a machine, but something else. A sigh that had nowhere else to go. The house is active memory. It bears you like the ocean bears a swimmer patiently, but not without force. My phone rang and I startled in the way people secretly relish when they're alone with old ghosts and an excuse to be interrupted arrives. Mara, hi, it's Eli. I had saved his number as a color, not a name. In another life, we had lived together in a one-bedroom with a view of the parking lot, and now we were the sort of people who remembered each other by temperature. He was winter light blue on my screen. Hey, I said. I heard about your mom, he said. Maya saw it on Facebook. I'm sorry. Thanks. The word had seams in it. Do you need anything? Eli asked, which was both kindness and script. No, I said. I could have said, come listen to this house with me, but he had always hated the basement. I'm okay, which was not a lie exactly, but it wasn't a story either. Maya says hi, Eli added, and I pictured his new wife, who was beautiful in the way that made you stand a little straighter when she looked at you. She had once told me before she was his wife, when she was his friend, that I had a talent for telling the truth like it was a trick. We're here if you need anything, he said again, because the script had a chorus. Thank you, I said, and pressed the red circle to end rehearsals. The house waited. The key on the table glowed as if it had its own small Sunday my eyes went back to the notebooks, to the lapidary precision of my mother's descriptions. M does not cry. M is brave. M wants the strawberry. M does not want the strawberry. M says the strawberry is hers. M says the strawberry is mine. It was like reading a weather report written by the person who had manufactured the storm. I set the notebook down and crossed to the mirror. Up close, all mirrors betray themselves. Their surface is not infinite. A mirror is a story about light, and all stories about light are also quietly about darkness. I leaned toward it, and my breath fogged an oval at the level of my mouth. In the fog, my name appeared, not written, implied. The word Mara, emerging from the vagueness. My mind had always been ready to complete a pattern, to find letters in noise. The fog dissolved, and the glass turned back into glass. Is someone there? I said. The air answered the way air answers, with the complicated kindness of silence. But something in the mirror shifted, not visibly, not like the moment in a film when a figure stands up in the other room, a smaller thing, a softening, the sense that there was, after all this time, still a corridor behind the glass, still a red light that could be turned on. Still a table where a tape recorder waited, a little brown box with two spools like patient eyes. I went to the corner of the room where the curve of wall met the thinner seam of a door. As a child, I used to press my ear to that seam and hear the nothing that of course is something when you are 7. The small metal panel to open the door stuck. I levered it with my fingernails until it gave, exposing the switch. The skin across my knuckles had the thinness of paper, the pale geography of someone who had not spent enough time in the Sunday. I flipped the switch up. The corridor behind the glass did what corridors do when they have been told they are real. It lit. The red bulb warmed like a small heart. The mirror turned true. Behind the glass, the narrow walkway looked like a stage set for listening. The tape recorder sat on its table as if it had been waiting for the cue of my touch. Dust rolled away in reluctant clouds when I breathed, and there above the recorder, taped to the wall in my mother's careful hand, were the labels. Test 1, strawberry, control. Test 2, strawberry plus mother present. Test 3, strawberry plus metronome. Test 4, hairbrush. Test 5, mirror. Test 6, mirror plus strawberry. And then a tear in the row of labels, the absence that rang louder than the presence. Test 7. Not there, not crossed out, not mislabeled, simply missing, like a tooth. You cannot look at a gap in a line without wanting to fill it. This is what humans do with loss. We draft it back into shape. I found the door on the corridor side and unlocked it with the key with room on its tag. The corridor was colder than the room, not by enough to be called cold, by enough to be called deliberate. Behind me, the curved room waited, all its soft corners suddenly theatrical, a shape for the eyes of a watcher. Even without an audience, it performed. On the table, the recorder had a plug. The outlet beside it was the old two-prong kind, the sort that lets electricity make a story of your body. When I plugged it in, the machine made a courteous sound and a light came on. The tapes were lined up in a shoebox, their spools like little lungs. I picked one with the label, Test 1 inch my mother's hand. I set it in the machine. The spools leaned into their purpose. When I pressed play, the sound of the room a long time ago filled the room that had become my now. The past is such a confident ventriloquist. My mother's voice, "All right, Mara, what do we say when we see the strawberry?" My voice, younger, "Please." "Please what?" "Please, may I hold it?" And, "What do we say when we're done?" "Thank you for keeping it safe." "And who keeps it safe?" "You." "And who else?" A pause. "The metronome. Somewhere its tick folded into the tape like a lineage." "Him," little me said. "The man." "Good," said my mother. "Her pleasure was a lid you learned to fit. Dr. Vale keeps it safe." A shuffle. A gulp. "Can I eat it?" "No, love," my mother said. "Not this one." The tape hissed, the special old-fashioned kind of hiss that fills the space around people with a layer of snow. I pressed stop. The quiet that followed was loud, in the way a phone that doesn't ring is a kind of ringing. I inserted test 2. My mother's voice, brighter, pitched toward a smile. "What do we do, Mara?" "Please, may I hold it?" "And who keeps it safe?" "You do." "And who else?" A longer pause. "Him." "All leave then, Riel." "And who is he?" "God," I said. And somewhere in the corridor air, my adult lungs tightened. Not because of God, because I could hear the way the word sat in my small mouth, like a pebble pushed in by someone else. "No," my mother said. so gently you would not have called it a correction. Dr. Vale? A laugh escaped me before I could catch it. It sounded like the bark of a dog in a church. I put in test 3. The metronome was louder, or the recorder closer to it. Tick. Mara, what do we want? Tock. Please, may I hold it? Tick. And when we're done, tock. Thank you for keeping it safe. Tick. Who keeps it safe? Tock. You. Tick. Who else? Tock. God. Tick. My mother, Dr. Vale. Tock. The metronome did what time does. It made persuasion sound like rhythm. I sorted through the tapes with a little covetousness that embarrassed me and felt entirely mine. Test 4 was all hairbrush, bristles turned into pedagogy. Test 5 was the mirror, my mother's voice asking, "Who is in the glass?" My smaller voice answering, "Me." And who else? Her. And who is she? The small hesitation I could hear even now, like the seed of a decision. Good girl, my mother said, although little me had not yet said the correct thing. The praise created the answer. And then test 6, the two objects together, mirror and strawberry, a combination like a chord that makes the singer's voice break. It played like a braiding of previous tapes, and then I thought I heard it a whisper, not in my mother's register or mine. Not male either exactly. The recorder stuttered, a rustle, and my child voice saying, "Loa, she will keep it safe." My mouth tasted like coins. I stopped the tape, started it again at the place where the whisper was. There, like breath with a shape, the whisper coming into being because I wanted to hear it. The psychology of this was rudimentary and true. If you expect a knock and attend carefully enough to a wall, you will give the wall a knuckle. Behind the tapes in the shoebox, a corner of something darker pried at my attention, a reel-to-reel tape tucked in a manila envelope, the way you might hide a talisman under trivia. My mother's handwriting again, test 7 strawberry plus mirror plus, with the question marks like a dare. And then, lower, heavier, do not play without Dr. Vale. Obedience hummed in my bones like a familiar song. I had been trained to love conditions, but my mother was in the earth, and Dr. Vale was a ghost that walked like a man somewhere in the city. The question was a magnet. I wanted to call him. I also wanted to hear the tape before his voice could enter the room and assign it a meaning. I stood in the corridor, the red light varnishing everything into an organ. No reel-to-reel player here. The recorder was cassette only. The old player would be in his office then, or in my mother's bedroom now, or, possibly, nowhere, because the universe sometimes prefers no to yes. I put the reel back in its envelope and slid it under my shirt as if the tape could feel me, and returned to the curve of the room. I sat on the couch. I did not turn on the metronome. The notebooks breathed through their paper. The house listened. What I had wanted, coming here, was unclear even to me. To collect something of my mother's that would justify the way I could not seem to cry at the cemetery, to stage an experiment with my grief in the old lab, and then grade it on a scale of 1 to 10. I thought of Eli's bright, generous winter voice and the phone as a small raft in my pocket. A memory came the way memories sometimes do, a sensory door opening without a knob. I was 10. My mother's hair was darker, enviable. She wore a cardigan with a stain she would not admit was oil because we were not the sort of people who allowed oil to exist. The room curved around us. "You have to be brave," she said. "It means you have to do it before you know if you can." "What does brave mean now?" I asked, as 10 as a bell. "Brave means keep your voice the same," she said. "Brave means when I say, Who keeps it safe, you say? Dr. Vale, I told her, the reflex alive in my mouth like a fish. But what about me? What about you? She said, but not cruelly. Who keeps me safe? I asked, and she must have looked at the glass then, because the memory shifts, the air moves, and in the place where her answer should be, there is the sound of someone settling on a folding chair, of a man adjusting the way he held his attention, and behind that, or above it, or somewhere below it, the flavor of strawberries without the fruit. The key on the table glinted like a small accusation. Room, as if all other rooms were superfluous. I picked up my phone and scrolled to a number I had not dialed since I was 17, and had called to tell him my mother had taken the tapes and that I did not want to come in anymore. The number had changed. Of course it had. People modernize. I searched until I found a listing. Vale, Adrian M., Ph.D., Forensic Assessment and Therapeutic Consultation. The website used serif fonts with the confidence of someone who believed in the 18th century. The photo showed a man who had kept his intellect but dispensed with the hat, his hair now thinner, his eyes the same. The biography included words like methodology and applied ethics, two phrases that had always made my mother act like she was catching a bouquet. I called. The phone rang, and I counted the rings because counting is the way some of us keep from unraveling. 4 rings. 5. He answered on 6, the number at which I had decided to hang up. This is Dr. Vale. Hello, Dr. Vale. My voice arranged itself into the polite shape it had learned to wear around him. This is Mara Le. You can hear the moment someone finds an old photograph in their head. He took a breath, the sound of paper sliding. Mara, he said carefully, it's been a long time. Yes, my mother died yesterday, I said, because news is an axe, and because grief makes you abrupt. The funeral was this afternoon. I'm sorry, he said, and the word in his mouth was not seamful. I'm very sorry. Your mother was... He paused. I could feel the list of things he could say. He selected one. Determined. She left me the house, I said. I'm in the basement. There was a sound then, the kind that tells you someone has sat down. How is it? He asked. It's listening, I said. Like always. Yes. He coughed into what I imagined was a careful fist. Why did you call me, Mara? I found the tapes, I said. The cassette tapes, and a reel labeled Test 7, and cried. Silence, attentive. She kept that, he said, not as a question. She kept everything, I said, because keeping the past had been her daily bread. The tape says not to play without you. Mara, he said, what do you want from me? I didn't like the way his tone made the question sound like a challenge. What do I want? I repeated, as if asking the glass to answer. I want to know what Test 7 is. On the line, I heard ethics weighing itself in one of his neat hands. I can be there in an hour, he said, and I could feel him making the decision to use the verb be rather than come, as if appearance were neutral. Will you wait? Handed. The house's ears touched the skin of my arms. The envelope with the reel was warm against my sternum. I could hear my mother's caution. Do not play without thread with my own hunger. Do not wait. Yes, I said. It seemed like a small thing to give an hour to the man who had spent a year teaching me to sit still while a fruit determined the texture of my love. I'll wait. Good, he said. Mara? Yes. Do not play it without me. All right. I hung up and put the phone face down, as if it could watch me. I stood and walked the curve of the room twice. The act of moving was a way to create a beginning and an end, to put parentheses around my impatience. On the third circuit, my foot caught on a ridge in the rug, and the world did the sudden tilt of brinksmanship. I steadied myself with a hand on the mirror and thought I don't know why of the strawberry again, the slick plastic, the way it had always been warm as if someone had just held it. I had always wanted to bite it. Of course, the whole project had been designed to turn wanting into guilt. On the table, the metronome sat like a sentence waiting for its predicate. I picked it up. It fit in my palm the way some objects are made to a geometry of hand and habit. I set it down again. And in the making and unmaking of that small movement, memory opened like a trap door. Under it, a scene I did not know I remembered. My mother whispering into the mirror, her lips close to the glass, as if it would catch her breath and keep it. "Please," she said, and then again, softer, "Please." The basilisk thrill of being overheard by a past version of the present slipped along my spine. I lifted the metronome and turned the dial and did not let it go. I let the desire live in my fingers like a tremor I was testing. Then I set it back down and did not let it tick. I went upstairs. I opened drawers with the guilty thrill of a person who has won the right to pry. In my mother's bedroom, the bed was made with a military neatness that always felt to me like a challenge more than an invitation. On her vanity were bottles the shapes of biographies, a perfume shaped like a flame, a bottle of lotion shaped like a pillar, a jar of cream shaped like a promise. I opened the closet and inhaled the scent of her, the ghost of laundry soap, and the battling sweetness of two perfumes, one citrus, one powder. At the back of the closet, under a stack of winter blankets, I found the thing I knew I would find, the reel-to-reel machine, heavy as an intention. I carried it downstairs with the two-handed focus of a pilgrim. Back in the corridor, I set it on the table and plugged it in. It woke itself carefully, like an old cat. The envelopes with the reels looked smaller beside it, like secrets admitting their scale. The part of me that believed in rules, raised meticulously by a woman who wore rules like pearls, held my hand away. The part of me the rules had been designed to tame made a different offer. It is very hard to be a person of only one part. I placed the reel on the spindle, the way you might place a crown on a soft head. I threaded the tape as I had seen it done 100 times in documentaries, in labs, in the private cinema of my obsessions. Ready? The play switch was a lever. Levers give you the illusion that you are moving the world rather than yourself. My phone lit with a text, unknown number but known tone. This is Dr. Vale. Is less than traffic. I'll be 30 minutes later than planned. I'm sorry. Is greater than. The house exhaled. If I had obeyed then, the story that followed would have been a different story. Another woman, perhaps. One with neat boundaries and a respect for process. The version of me who waited might have married someone like Eli and never learned the strange grammar of a house that remembers. I could see her for a second, moving through a kitchen with a bowl, humming something that does not hurt. Then the vision folded. I pressed play. The machine made the sound that is not a sound and that is all sounds, the hiss that means a moment is expanding its edges. For a second, the tape gave nothing, the way the ocean gives you nothing just before it gives you a wave. Then my mother, Session 7, present, M, parent, present, yes, observer, Dr. V, object present. A pause, the soft rearrangement of fabric, strawberry, mirror, And another pause, as if she were waiting to be permitted to say the word neighbor child. There was a shiver in my stomach that felt like I had swallowed a fish. The room without corners acquired one corner in my mind, and into that corner pressed the shape of a boy. I could not furnish him until the tape did. The tape obliged. A child's voice, not mine. "My name is Jonah." A small, courteous sound from my mother. "Thank you, Jonah. And your last name?" A giggle. "Do I have to?" "You do not have to," my mother said, in that careful, kind tone that meant very much that you had to. "But it would help keep you safe." "Jonah Reeves," he said, turning the R into a ripple. And then my voice, small and almost bored, because I had learned that boredom made things safer. "Please, may I hold it?" "Good," my mother said. The metronome then, tick. I could feel the way the room must have felt, the sense of something being combined that had not yet been combined before. The strawberry as a ritual, and the mirror as a judge and a boy whose voice was new in this space. "What is the point of the mirror?" Jonah asked, with that clear and irritating curiosity that some children are born knowing is a weapon. "To observe," my mother said softly, "and to tell the truth." "Why do we tell the truth to the mirror?" he asked, and my mother's breath on the tape made a micro-weather. "Because it remembers," she said. "Because it keeps us safe." "Who keeps it safe?" I asked, obedient. "You," said my mother. "And who else?" "Dr. Vale," I said, and heard, for the first time ever on these tapes, a laugh from the corridor side, a breath of amusement that was almost certainly his. "Very good," my mother said. "Now, Mara, the strawberry." There was a rustle, and the tape silence arranged itself around a movement like a body adjusts around a bruise. Jonah's voice again, close to the microphone in that way children simply are when told not to be. "It smells," he said. "Like what?" my mother asked. "Plastic," he said. "And what else?" She pushed. And in that push I heard the entire architecture of her life. "Like a toy," Jonah said, and then, in a whisper, "like the strawberry in my kitchen." And "Good," my mother said, so gratified. "Now, Jonah, hold the strawberry and look in the mirror and tell me who will keep it safe." The tape creaked. The metronome took responsibility for time. "Tick, tock." "My mom," Jonah said. "Faithful, and the man." "And who is the man?" my mother asked, the question a caress that could also be a collar. "God," he said, and nothing on the earth could have prevented the laugh that rose out of me in the present. The tape breathed. My mother, quiet, alerted. "Not God," she said, softer, intimate. "Dr. Vale." "No," Jonah said, with the serious insult of a child who has decided something. "God." "God Abijah." The metal of the recorder made a nervous little warbling like a throat clearing. I thought of Dr. Vale in the corridor, crossing one leg over the other, adjusting the angle of his attention hat. "Jonah," he said, his voice slipping onto the tape for the first time like a coin into a fountain. "We are talking about the strawberry in this room." "Strawberries are the same," Jonah said. "Even not real ones are still fruit." There is a point in any controlled environment where control becomes embarrassed. I listened to my mother, trying not to be. "Mara," she said, "who keeps it safe?" I could hear the way I turned toward the place her voice came from because my words went sideways. "You, Mama," I said dutifully. And then, because I had been taught that generosity performed well, got you things. And Dr. Vale and God. "Good girl," my mother said too quickly. "Thank you," I said. The metronome ticked. Jonah giggled as if someone had touched his ribs. "Now," my mother said, reasserting the ritual. "Mirror, look." The recorder made a small suffering sound, the fidelity of the thing being not entirely equal to the age of the sound, and then came a whisper. Not male, not female, not child. The kind of whisper a pipe makes when the weather is nervous. The kind of whisper wood makes when it is asked to be a grandma. And in the whisper, not words exactly, but a shaping around the syllables of mine and yours, a frightened not voice that made my skin feel too small for me. I accused myself of inventing it. I did not mind the accusation. The shape remained. "Did you hear that?" Jonah asked. The tremor of delight and fear mixed perfectly. "What did you hear?" my mother asked. "The mirror," he said, confident. "What did it say?" Dr. Vale asked, and there was a slowness in his tone that in another life I might have mistook for kindness, but now I understood as precision. "It said," Jonah began, and then paused because he was 7, and the number 7 keeps its own counsel. "It said, keep me safe, and don't from, but at no head mar." The metronome, merciless, measured the silence that followed. It was the kind of silence that made you feel watched, the kind of silence that can throw the human voice out of orbit. And then little me, not bored anymore. "I keep you safe," I told the mirror, as if it had asked me a question. "I do. I do." The repetition was a ritual that had become the shape of apology. The tape at that moment made a small buckling sound, a momentary warble that I recognized from old recordings as the place where the ribbon stuck and then unstuck, a technological stutter that did not entirely disguise the human one beneath it. Under the warble, a sound like air crying, my mother saying my name as if saying it would hold me to the floor. "Mara," she said, "Mara, keep your voice the same." And then, unmistakably, a thud. Not catastrophic, not even dramatic. The thud of a soft thing hitting a hard surface. Jonah's laugh slicing off like a ribbon. The metronome, relentless. "Jonah," my mother said, with an edge I did not remember in her voice. Don't what?" he asked, breathing in his grin. A clatter. The sense of many small things trying to become a single sound. My mother again. "Mara, keep your voice the same." And then my voice, which was not the same. "It's not mine anymore," I said. "Stop." And 10. The tape rushed forward for a second and then, like a person catching themselves on a stair, found its balance. In the corridor of my present, I heard myself breathing like I had run stairs I had not run. I reached for the stop button because fear in me, since infancy, had worn the mask of control. I wanted to pause time. I did not press it. The recorder offered the sound of a body moving quickly in a small space. The metallic cluck of the doorknob. My mother's no, not sharp but with an exclamation point she had previously kept in a drawer. The door clicking. The rearranged air of an opening, and then a sound that made the hair on my arms know they had a job. It was the sound of something breaking that was not glass and not wood. It was the sound of belief. "Stop," little me said again, and because people often obey children when children use the voice they themselves are afraid of, everything on the tape paused. The metronome ticked, fat with time. And then, Dr. Vale said, "We're done." And you could hear the calculus in his decision, the kind that considers variables that names do not catch. He must have pressed stop then because the tape surrendered to hiss. And hiss is the way machines wait. I realized I had been pressing fingernails into my thigh, little moons marked into skin that would fade by the time he arrived here in the present. Late, apologizing, hatless, I pressed stop. The room stepped back into itself. The house put its ear back against my words. Upstairs, the refrigerator motor hummed a song it had learned the year we bought it. The jacaranda dropped 3 more blooms onto the driveway, their papery bodies ready to become part of the ground. My phone, face down on the table, hummed a gentle reminder that there was a world in which traffic mattered more than tests. I looked at the reel-to-reel and then at the mirror and felt the room shift closer to me. I have no better phrase. As if the house had decided to be a person for a second and come stand at my shoulder. "Test 7, I said to the glass. "What did you do with him?" The mirror kept my face. Behind it, the corridor waited for a man who was late. The tape on the spindle was wound into a plateau. I touched its edge with one fingertip and felt the tiny teeth of story. A part of me, a large part, wanted to call my mother's cousin in the red tie and ask whether he believed in monsters. Another part of me wanted to eat a real strawberry until the sugar made my mouth hurt. Somewhere in the braid of these wants, a third part of me simply wanted to sleep and wake into a morning where the house had forgotten me. The key on the table gleamed. The tag said room and nothing else, as if naming a space were itself a wish, as if saying there is a room could conjure one. I put the key into my pocket and was surprised by how heavy it was, the weight of permission. Footsteps on the steps above, light as a rehearsal. Not Eli, not the funeral director. In the basement where the walls learned to be gentle by bending, the sound came down like a hand on a shoulder. It was, of course, the house. But the house had chosen, for a little while, to sound like a man. Chapter 2. The Mirror That Answered. The footsteps stuttered once, and then composed themselves into a gait that tried to be quiet about its age. I stood without meaning to. The house inhaled, the door at the top of the stairs opened, and the hall light drew a yellow stripe across the ceiling, a ruler enforcing straightness on a room that refused to have corners. "Mara," he said from the landing, and the years rearranged themselves around his voice like furniture pulled to the walls when guests arrive. He looked smaller than I remembered and more exact. His hair had changed inexpensively, the way time changes things without calling a contractor. The hat of intellect I had imagined for him all my life was gone. There was only the pate, a few tidy sentences of gray, and the eyes. The eyes were, as I remembered, alert in a way that made you feel like an experiment and also like a person. "I told myself I wouldn't come in without asking," he said, stepping down anyway. "You just did," I replied, and was surprised to hear the affection in the insult. "I did," he agreed, and offered me a smile that stayed firmly in the professional half of his face. He noticed the machine then, on the corridor table behind the glass. The reel paused in its small brown plateau. His gaze moved from it to me to the envelope half tucked under the couch cushion, as if my attempts at secrecy could still be taught to be better. "You played it," he said. Not a question. The house did nothing as dramatic as creak. It merely listened harder. "I did," I said. "Was that—" I gestured toward "Do not play without Dr. Vale," as if it were a law rather than a label, for my mother or for me. He took a breath, elevator slow. "For me," he said. "I wanted to be the person who heard it if it was ever heard again." He waited for me to ask why. I walked to the mirror instead so that my wanting would have something to lean on. "Test 7, I said, letting the syllables fit the space around my teeth. "What did we do?" "We? Very good," he said, as if praising a chess move that would cost me the queen 2 turns later. Your mother requested a social condition. She wanted to see whether you told the truth differently when there was another child present. And by truth, I said, you mean the story the room would keep. I mean the narrative you could bear, he said. And it was ludicrous and a little beautiful that he believed in phrases like that, even here, under our old red light. Jonah, I said, and he flinched so slightly that only the house and I could have seen it. Neighbor child, Reeves, you remember? He asked. I remember his R, I said. I heard it on the tape. He stepped closer to the glass and looked not at me but at the room he used to own. He moved away the next year, he said. A job, his mother's sister. They went to Ohio. It wasn't. He searched for a sentence that would be a door instead of a wall. Nothing happened to him here, Mara. You left, I said. The words had the bluntness of accusation and also the softness of a fact. After 7, I filed an ethics complaint the week before, he said. I told her I would. She invited you, always, to be brave in a way that meant obedient. I told her the fish in the bowl were different things. She told me bowls keep fish safe. And do they? I asked. Who keeps the bowl? The room, he said, because he can love an elegant answer more than he can love a true one. Test 7. I tasted the place where I'd stopped the reel. The strawberry, I said, and he looked at me sharply because he had trained me to put the key word in the lock. He opened the corridor door with the same careful pressure he had used on my mind when I was small. He crossed behind the glass and stood at the observer table, which was not a table at all but a workstation, which is a difference you can feel in your knees. He did not sit. He put his hands on the back of the chair like a man who had learned to touch restraint to remind himself of it. You said you wanted to wait, he said, and you did not. I'm not angry. I don't care that you're not angry, I said, and the room warmed because the house enjoys a little rudeness when it is true. I heard a voice. The tape's hiss, he said. It wasn't hiss. The mind is a confessional that prefers to be a stage, he said. You know this. What did we do? I asked again. He reached for the lever and did not touch it. We brought another child into a ritual that had been designed to isolate you, he said. We asked both of you to agree about the rules. We asked you to tell the mirror who kept you safe. God, I said, and for a second both of us were smiling because an insistence that simple is a kind of mercy. We told it, God. You told it many things, he said. His voice thinned. Your mother wanted to prove that with enough rehearsal, truth becomes obedience. She wanted proof that safety could be taught, that safety could be made. And you? My question rang a little. I wanted to prove that all of us are listening to the same hum and calling it different names, he said, that I could lower the volume without turning it off. Who keeps you safe? I asked him, and his smile did not move. He put his fingertip on the lever. You stopped before the end, he said. After we're done, there are another 17 minutes. I could not help it. I reached for the chair back on my side and mirrored him. Some old geometry of us clicked. Play it, I said. He did. The hiss re-entered like weather. In the room, the metronome picked up its toy heart. Tick. Then voices as faithful as bad dreams. End recording, my mother said on the tape, but you can hear when people think they have ended the audience and have not. The machine faithfully gathered the way she and he allowed themselves to breathe once they felt alone. That's what machines are for. You see? She whispered, too close to the mic. He said God. Head is no. He is 7, Dr. Vale said on the tape. There was a miniature thunder from the chair as he stood. You asked him to choose between you and a word for the part of the world that forgives him before it knows him. I asked him to tell the truth, she said, and the force of her tenderness on the tape caught in my throat the way a pill does when you've counted on water. I asked my daughter to be brave. You asked your daughter to keep her voice the same while you changed the room, he said. That is not bravery. That is choreography. You object to dance? She said, and I could hear her smile like silk tugged through a ring. You object to the way a well-practiced movement can free the mind? What will free whose mind from what? He asked. And in the old argument I could hear their old pleasure. Bring him home. She is holding the strawberry, my mother said. There was the sound again, the small buckling, and then the new noise. Tiny polymer beads moving over stone like sand, like a beach, built inside a season that did not deserve it. The strawberry had split along its seam, then the sound of belief breaking. There was the gentle panic of many hands trying to be gentle at once, and Jonah's caught laugh, and my child voice saying, "It's all right, I'll keep it safe." You see, my mother said triumphantly into the tape. You see? What I see, he said, is a child making a promise to a plastic fruit while you watch and call it a philosophy. The scrape of a chair, the door, a little gasp that was not mine. It's bleeding, Jonah said in a tone that enjoyed being wrong. Not blood, my mother soothed. Feel, look, touch. No, my voice said. It's mine. It isn't yours, my mother replied softly. Things are not mine, I said, and the third syllable lodged stubborn as a berry hoe. Then the tape did a thing tapes sometimes do when the people in the room forget the microphone is there. It caught small noises that later become festivals. The click when you look at someone in a way that makes them older. The way two adults begin to talk to each other in a dialect they mean for you not to learn. The slow jammed wardrobe of silence when obedience takes too long. Adrian, my mother said, that careful intimacy. The use of a first name when the room was designed to keep last names upright. Help me. How? Tell them, she said. Tell them the same thing. You both know the rules, he said. You were born inside liturgy. Please, she said. Not to him exactly. The word fogged the glass of the life we had then and wrote nothing. Tell them, Adrian, who keeps it safe. A long breath, which is a kind of concession. Children, his recorded voice said, not to my mother, not to me, not to Jonah, but to the room, as if the room were the child most likely to obey. The strawberry is not alive. Everything is alive, Jonah said with the irritated certainty of children and prophets. The strawberry is not alive, he repeated more softly. It does not need to be kept. What about the mirror? I asked. And in the question I could hear the whole floor of my childhood. It does not need, he said. Who keeps it safe? My mother asked. Not to him now, but to me, because ritual can always be reapplied like lipstick. I keep me safe, I said on the tape. And the room, this room, now moved toward me the tiniest fraction, like a horse that has decided you deserve its shoulder. On the tape, there is a silence after those 4 words, and you can hear 3 different adults learning to breathe. Again, my mother whispered, and the request was a plea and a command braided together. I keep me safe, I said, and because the second time is not an echo when you mean it, the sentence acquired its own spine. The metronome, as if offended by our independence, grew very loud. Tick! Jonah said, giggling. I keep me safe. And the giggle lodged, and Dr. Vale on the tape laughed, and my mother did not. Good, she said, and the word was brittle as sugar glass. Good, good. The reel lifted into hiss, and then a small click the recorder cut off finally, late to its duty. In the basement where time had learned to bend, the quiet that followed opened like a door into air I had not breathed before. Behind the glass in the corridor, the living Dr. Vale had lowered his head, a gesture that could be reverence or shame or the convenient third thing people invent to escape the accurate first two. When he raised it, his eyes were wet without being soft. "You remember none of that?" he asked. "I remember wanting to bite the fruit and being told it would make me sick," I said. "I remember loving her careful penmanship more than I loved any story it told." "She loved you," he said reflexively, like a person instinctively covering a child's ears when the siren goes by. "She loved the experiment," I said. And then, because I was suddenly tired of losing arguments with ghosts, she loved me the way a scientist loves a beautiful hypothesis. She would forgive me anything that proved her right. He could not disagree and he could not agree, so he sat finally, his hands clasped, and looked at the mirror from the side, the way you look at a person you are not ready to face. "I heard a third voice," I said. "I know," he said simply. "You heard it too?" My heart made a small, complicated movement that in another context I might have called hope. "I heard you," he said, and despite myself I smiled and then hated him for the small pleasure. We build the acoustics we expect. She built a faith that breath fog on glass would contain language. I built a faith that if words were asked enough times, they would become honest. "You," he broke off and gestured to the metronome, the stones, the notebooks. "You built a way of keeping time." "My father?" I asked before I could stop myself. The question fell between us and lay there considering whether to be born. "Gone," he said, "by the time you were 7. "He didn't die," I said. "No," he said. "He believed in a different room." A small, manageable rage rose in me like heat from a radiator that will never learn summer. "She made this room," I said. "She made a room where she could win." "People who are afraid of corners," he said, "are often afraid of edges. People who are afraid of edges are often afraid of falling. Your mother would rather bend a wall than risk a cliff, but a cliff is where air happens," I said, surprising myself. "A cliff is where you can see." A light thing moved through him then, gratitude maybe, or relief that I would do the work of metaphor so he could rest. He glanced toward the corridor, where the red bulb had become less heart and more weather. "May I show you something?" he asked. "No," I said, and then, "Yes." He disappeared from my sight and reappeared in the curved room by using the door rather than the glass, because the house did not owe either of us any magic. Up close, he smelled like paper and the soap of men who have lived alone long enough to believe in the athleticism of cleanliness. He knelt old body, new patience, by the small metal table. He lifted the ceramic bowl that held the stones. "She used these to give you a task," he said, "so you would have something to do with your hands while your voice did something else." "Counting," I said. 21. It escaped before I could call it back. "Ah," he said, with a tenderness that I went to war against and almost lost. He set the bowl down and chose a stone smooth as an argument polished by repetition. "I would like, if you will let me, to give you a different task." "I am not 7, I said, "because I am always in conversation with some older man's idea of my age." "I know," he said. "That is why I am asking." He placed the stone in my palm like a benediction I did not accept and did not refuse. "Hold it," he said. "When you are ready, ask the question differently." "What question?" I said, though of course I knew. "Not who keeps it safe," he said. "Who keeps you?" His head sapped. I stood, because standing changes your blood's opinion about your body. I walked to the mirror, and the mirror attended. The corridor light printed a darker red inside my mouth, a bruise of color on every syllable. I raised my stone and for a second thought of throwing it, not to break the glass, but to hear the clean sound of interruption. I did not throw it. "You?" I said to my reflection, my voice calm by choice rather than command. "Who keeps you?" The house waited. It did not do tricks. The mirror offered me my own face and the small frustration of light. The metronome sat with its arrogance unlit. Behind me, a man I had once adored for having the vocabulary to name my storms remained respectfully quiet. "I do," I said. "No one else first." For a moment, there was only the embarrassment of declaration. Then something I had not planned to happen happened, which is the only way any new thing happens in a room like this that has been fed for years on rehearsal. The red light behind the glass flickered once and steadied. My reflection did not move and did not move, and then she moved. No, I did. I did the smallest thing a face can do that is not a smile. I allowed myself to be seen by myself. "I keep me," I said again, and the sentence picked up weight like a child picks up stones for reasons only the child understands. "Good," said Dr. Vale. It did not have to be his line, it was mine, but I permitted him for this breath to borrow it. "What happens now?" I asked the house. "Now," he said, answering for it out of habit, "we stop." "Now," I said, correcting gently, "we switch." He blinked and for the first time since he had entered the room, looked uncertain. It was a kind of beauty to me. "I want to sit where you sat," I said. "I want to watch the room and I want to be watched. I want it to be both ways. No more one-way glass, no more red light theology. I want the room to learn." He opened his hands the way birds open them before they discover they have always been wings. "Yes," he said. We did the obvious things that felt, in that moment, like inventing a language. He went behind the glass and turned off the corridor light. I left the room light on and sat on the couch, then changed my mind and sat on the floor because floors forgive. He drew the chair forward until it faced me directly. He did not pick up a pen. He did not reach for a lever. He put his hands on his knees and did a novel thing in this house. He simply, "Saturday." "Begin," he said. "What do we call this?" I asked. He considered the holiness of naming. "Test 8, he said solemnly, and then smiled at his own joke like a man who has not quite learned jokes. "Object, none." "Subject," I said. "Mara, parent, present," he said, and then stopped and for once allowed grammar to be honest. "No." "Witness present," I countered. "Yes, yes," he said. I inhaled and put my palms flat on my thighs the way my mother had taught me, and then raised them and let them fall the way no one had taught me because I am alive. I spoke to him through the glass that was not a mirror, and to the mirror that was not a glass, and to the house. "Who keeps me?" I said without pushing the verb forward with fear. "I hear you," he said, which was not an answer but was a promise. "I want to tell you a story," I said, feeling dangerous because there was no notebook open to catch me. "I am 7, and the plastic strawberry has already learned my name. It learns it so fast because it is made to be held, and I am made to hold things until they learn me. My mother is a room. She loves me. She loves me so much that she makes me into a machine that confirms love is safe if you practice it enough. A man in a hat loves the way words feel when they sharpen. He loves the way a ritual can teach a child to name her fear. He believes if he names it enough, it will get tired. And oh, Mara, he said, and my name in his mouth was different than it had been. It was a thing to be offered a chair, not an order to sit. Yes, I am 32, I said, and the sentence warmed my teeth. I keep me. This is not a rebellion. This is a liturgy that belongs to no church. The metronome looked patient. I picked it up. I held it. I saw with adult cruelty and adult tenderness the workshop seam where cheap wood pretends to be no seam at all. I set the metronome down on its side so the arm could not find its arc, and in that petty geometry I felt a joy as clean as rain. I placed the stone next to it, the smooth and the precise, sharing a small table. Then I did the last needed thing. I walked to the mirror, and, with the key that had all day been heavy only with the idea of heaviness, I unlocked the corridor door from my side and opened it. All that happened was air moved. All that happened was two spaces joined the way. Two thoughts join when you lose your fear that joining them will make either smaller. He stood. We met in the threshold where the glass used to be a border. There was nothing to dramatize with sudden weather. The room simply incorporated a new shape. I can't give you your mother, he said. I don't want my mother, I said, because I had been given her and had learned what it means to be the person she gives things to. I want what I have. He did a small bow that was possibly his apology for the last 15 years. Then you have it. We turned together and looked at the place where the mirror had been something more than an opening. It was only a frame now, empty in the generous way furniture empties when you decide the room can hold fewer things. The red bulb, switched off, looked like an ornament saved after the tree is gone. The metronome lay on its side with an aristocratic boredom it had not earned. The strawberry, split along its seam all those years ago, was not here. We had never put it back in the bowl with the stones. In your notes, I said, you wrote a line. You told my mother she was making a scientist of a child and a witness. His laugh was not kind to himself. I had not yet learned the difference, he said. I am both, I said. I can be both without being her experiment. He nodded, and the nod belonged to me. I would like to say something, he ventured, that she never allowed me to say. Not to you? No, I said from habit, and then, because habit is a hallway and not a house. Yes, you did not fail the room, he said. The room failed you every time it asked you to choose between telling the truth and being loved. I sat on the threshold because thresholds are chairs if you deny them the power to be lines. The jacaranda outside informed the driveway of itself again, papery, purple, precise. The refrigerator upstairs sang the old song about coldness. Somewhere, a neighbor watered a plant with the decisiveness of a person who cannot fix a life and so tends a geranium. Will you sell? He asked. Practical like a man who knows the bill will always come no matter how beautifully you talk over it. I don't know, I said. I might teach it another trick first. What trick? He asked, genuinely curious, and for a moment I loved him for it. I went to my mother's notebooks and found a blank page toward the end of the last one, the one where her lines had begun to soften and her numbers sometimes listed to one side like drunks. On the top of the page I wrote in my own hand, which had never quite forgiven third grade, Test 8, Self. Under it, I wrote, object present, none. Mirror present, open. Witness present, optional. Instruction, ask only once, answer twice. No metronome, no strawberry, no God unless invited. I tore the page out and taped it to the wall, where the row of old labels ended in a careful absence. The tape made a sound like an admission. Will you sign it? I asked him, and he did not hide his surprise. It's your test, he said. You were my witness, I said. He took the pen and wrote his name small, as if he understood that what he was signing was not an ownership but a seeing. I signed under him with an arrogance I had decided to cultivate on purpose. Now what? He asked. Now we go upstairs, I said, and ruin the kind of grief that requires a basement to stand up. We turned off lights and carried our small machines of memory like harmless animals. On the stairs, he counted. I did not. The house made a small approving sound at the top, like the release of a long-held thought. In the kitchen, I found in her freezer the bag of strawberries she had bought and probably never thawed. I set them on a plate and waited while they changed states. He leaned against the doorway with the patience of a man who has learned that some thawing cannot be coaxed with talk. We ate them when they were still cold enough to be inconvenient. The cold hurt. The sugar diluted its apology into our tongues. To Jonah, he said suddenly, softly, as if afraid the house would think the name a claim, wherever he is. To my mother, I said, and if there was vinegar in my mouth with the sweet, I did not spit it out. Who kept what she could? And to you, he added, and looked at me, not like a patient and not like a child and not like a project and not like a mystery, just long enough and steady enough to be a person looking at a person who keeps what you choose. After he left, the house relaxed the way a cat does when the guests have been told to go. I walked back to the basement, not because anything remained to do there, but because a place that has held you deserves to be looked at when you are no longer the shape it knows. The curved walls seemed, if not straighter, less certain that bending was their only holy choice. In the empty frame where the mirror had been the most itself, I could see a sliver of hallway, a suggestion of the stairs, the freedom of a door. I sat once more on the floor and I did the last small ritual in a life that had been made of such things. I set the metronome upright and let it tick 3 times, because 3 is a number in which many holy lies and many honest spells agree. Then I stopped it with 2 fingers. I did not feel triumphant. I felt like a person who has picked a lock and will now try, daily, to learn how doors work. Upstairs, night gathered without ceremony, and the jacaranda gave itself to the driveway in purple, purple, purple. I took one of the stones from the bowl and put it in my pocket, and put the key with the room tag next to it. In my mother's cobalt bowl, I left what I no longer needed, the tag that said room and nothing else. On a slip of paper I wrote home and put it under the magnet where her lottery list had been. If the house wanted to laugh at me for the gesture, it was kind enough not to. In bed, there in the room she had kept as neat as any hypothesis, I listened to the refrigerator sing and the far neighbor's dog edit the night with one judicious bark, and the hush of the street live its name. I thought of Eli and his winter voice, and I did not call him. I thought of Jonah and imagined him in Ohio, taking a strawberry out of a blue plastic carton and biting it, and finding inside that it was only strawberry and that nothing needed to be kept. I thought of Dr. Veil, which is to say I thought of myself reflected in a pair of eyes no longer arranged to teach me anything. Sometime toward morning, the house decided to sleep. It is an old house. It is allowed to have that magic. Before it closed its eyes, it leaned down in my mind and said, in the voice that sometimes belongs to mirrors, and sometimes belongs to children, and sometimes belongs to women who have decided to live, "Keep you, I will," I said out loud, to the ceiling and the jacaranda and the yearly moth that had somehow found its way to my room. I will. And in that sentence was every corner the room had withheld and returned, each a place to brace my hand against when the stairs stuttered, each a place to pin a grocery list that was not a ritual but a life.